Hello, hello. Welcome to episode 7 of Beers with VCs, where we have casual conversations about the less talked about aspects of venture capital and startup building. We are your hosts, Sabrina Passman and Simon Lancaster, and today we are very excited to be joined by Rama and Rayed of Transform VC. They have built an incredible career in the startup and venture worlds and are now spearheading the Impact of Billion movement. We are very thrilled to have them on the podcast. Rama and Rayed, welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. Okay, well, we'll start off. Let's all show what beverages we're drinking today. Simon, you want to kick us off?
Sure.
Yeah.
I've got a copper can. It's a Moscow Mule. People gave me such a hard time for fasting last time and drinking water. I was forced to go back to an alcoholic beverage. This is great. It's very Moscow Muley, limey, and minty, and delicious. I'm looking forward to enjoying
Very
it.
lovely.
Awesome.
Rama, how about you?
The dry kind. So I'm going with sparkling water with lemon.
Oh, but you have the lemon. It's fancy.
There you go.
I'll go next. I know, Rayed, you have a very fancy one to show us. I just have socks and sandals today. Good, solid,
Nice.
humble beer. Yep. I like
Awesome.
it. Mhm.
Awesome. Yeah, well, my drink is what I call it the healthy Gatorade.
Oh.
Gatorade is filled with electrolytes and all that. So what I do is I get the bubbly, and I pour some into my glass right here, and
A live demo.
that's right. Then I apply some Himalayan salt.
Ooh.
No way.
There's multiple effects. One, it looks really cool as it does all that.
A whole nucleation
cool.
situation. That's awesome.
And cheers to you all. Thanks
Wow,
Cheers.
cheers everyone.
Cheers.
Cheers.
I've never had someone pull an automatic salt dispenser on the show so far.
I
Pretty
only
awesome.
have
Always
the
count
pepper
on-
variety.
Always count on Raed to make it special.
I'm very pumped. This is going to be amazing. Okay, let's dive in. This is a huge topic, I think, and very topical, particularly for the past year venture, and we're hoping also for the next decade. You have been involved in the impact space for quite some time. And before we dive into that whole world, though, a lot of people that say they're interested in making an impact, they have had experiences in their own lives and substantial hurdles that they've had to overcome that have caused them to now want to focus on impact and look to pay it forward. And you have each built incredibly successful careers, but I'd love to hear more about each of your origin stories. Rayed, do you want to start us off with your origin story?
Great, thank you. Well, I was born in Jordan on a summer vacation, and that's the extent of my relationship with Jordan. I grew up in Saudi as a kid and then moved to Canada as a teenager. A place we called Silicon Valley North. The nickname we gave Ottawa because we had Nortel and Corel and Mitel and Cognos and all these multi-$100 billion companies that none of which exist today. Despite all that, I did a few interesting things. I had 5 startups, 3 failures, and got lucky twice with 220x outcomes. And I learned 2 important lessons from Canada. As much as I love it, it's home. Most of what I am is a product of that ecosystem. It's really Silicon Valley is a place where if you want to truly have global impact with technology. So I made it a point to move to Silicon Valley. Second lesson is the maximum I can hope to accomplish being an entrepreneur in Canada is make myself a billionaire. I couldn't have a bigger dream than that. However, as a venture capitalist, Rama and I, we've got the legitimate aspiration to empower and invest in 1,000 other founders, help them each impact $1 billion and make $1 billion. So no other job in the world affords us this aspiration, and it's the maximum impact per unit time. So really thrilled to be here. Thanks for having us.
I love that.
That's awesome.
Rama, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, so I grew up in the DC metro area and I went to school there and was in tech and telecom. In my 20s, I was faced with an autoimmune disease and found myself with a series of health challenges that really broke the element of fear and consideration for fear. And so I started taking major risks, was involved in a startup that was funded to the order of $60 million, building out data centers, exited. And from there, I felt I had to do something more impactful. So I ventured into the Middle East and started visiting refugee camps and other locations where you could see firsthand what sort of challenges people were facing. And from there, built a tech incubator that dealt with impact and ran it for about 10 years. We graduated a number of successful companies, and some were acquired, and then came back here to the States and joined Raed on this mission of impact a billion and make a billion.
It's so incredible. I feel like even within those stories, there's so many pockets that we could dive into. I'd love to understand at what point in your careers you realized that impacting the future was what you wanted to be doing for the rest of your lives.
Yeah. Rama, would you like to go first? Or?
No, go ahead.
All right, awesome. Well, as I mentioned, I grew up in Canada, and I helped a friend of mine start a mobile shop, like a cell phone store, and realized that most Canadians, much like me, are relatively used and abused by the incumbent carriers.
Mm-hmm.
The average Canadian paid $70 a month. Our wireless penetration was at 60%, where Americans paid half of that per month, and the wireless penetration was north of 100%. So decided one day that I would love to start a cell phone operator. It was a 3-year journey, and it all ended with my participating in the national Spectrum auction, where I was, I think, 27 or 28 years old, and I was raising $800 million. I was literally laughed out of rooms saying, why you? And I was, my response is, why not me? I'm here, I'm working hard. If someone else is working just as hard, give them the money. And sure enough, I was able to raise capital and go to auction. Our last bid was over $200 million, but someone else bid more. So we lost. I call this my most spectacular failure. But truly, this was the most spectacular failure because it taught me that anything is possible so long as one can apply themselves. And what I truly wanted to do at that instance is just bring affordable wireless to me and fellow Canadians. And as a result of that, I just realized that truly anything is possible. You just got to apply yourself. And I'd love to bring this experience and the network and scar tissue that developed along the years to our founders.
That whole process required so much grit, coming into not even having been a native Canadian and also just saying, like, I'm young, I can be the next giant player in this space with, little to no experience. It sounds like from when you got started, like what is your advice for founders, I guess, to realize that their potential can be limitless? Like, how do you get people over that hurdle?
Well, there are two lessons I learned. A lot of lessons, but 2 big lessons. One is that everybody's reachable. If you got a good idea, there's a billionaire out there who wants to hear it. That's lesson number 1. Lesson number 2, it's equally easy or equally hard to raise $1 million as to raise $800 million. You just have to convince someone. That someone happens to have a different size pocket, of course. Once you understand that these 2 things are available to you, then really the sky's the limit. And I always tell founders, even those I pass on, is, hey, don't take my word for granted. I've been told no many, many times. If you truly believe in this, keep moving forward.
Such a unique perspective. It really shatters the glass ceiling for, I think, for everyone hearing this, that fundraising can be achieved at any scale if you ask the right people. Sometimes it feels like you have to take everything in small bite-sized chunks, but honestly, to make the biggest impact, you kind of have to take the big leaps. And that's kind of what you're highlighting, I think.
I mean, it comes down to your ambition. If your ambition is to be here, you're never going to get here.
Totally.
Simple as that. The maximum anyone could achieve is their ambition.
Yeah.
Raed, do you ever encounter imposter syndrome, or did you? And do you still? And do you ever mentor founders around the topic?
I always have. I'm very poor at detecting this imposter syndrome, let's just say. But I don't know if people are doing so or not. But I just kind of go to first principles and decide whether I want to be part of the story or not part of the story. And then sometimes I'm proven wrong and people are still at it. I'm like, these guys, good for them. That's, I missed out. And I'm happy. I'm still happy for the person for getting to whatever they wanted to get to.
Mm-hmm. Rama, tell us more about what the impetus was, because you also came from straight up tech world, it sounds like, and then did a gigantic leap into a totally unknown territory. Like, what caused that? And then also, how did that impact the way that you speak with founders?
So definitely the combination of my personal experience plus being in Dubai at the time. My personal experience, having been battery operated with a pacemaker and a defibrillator for about 5 years, I was so grateful for tech for doing that. But that was also really far reaching for me. I couldn't imagine myself moving into that deep tech world of medical devices. But being in Dubai and watching the city grow, mainly around economic development, while listening to everything that was happening in the region in terms of challenges, whether it's poverty, education, refugee camps, I was always drawn to, okay, well, who's doing work in that space? And it was mainly nonprofits that were very ill-equipped from a media and tech perspective. So my first impetus was, how can we combine these nonprofits with tech companies that can help them change the narrative? And I was instrumental in bringing the first wave of crowdfunding platforms to the region and helping raise millions of dollars through those platforms and equipping the nonprofits, but then very quickly turned to, how do we build these platforms from the ground up in the region, and who are the founders who care about this and are doing this work? And from there, it just became my life.
That's super impactful just from the get-go, because it's applying tech to areas where they've never gotten that software facelift. And that's actually a thesis I think that we ourselves at Omni are operating on as well, is that there's so many industries out there that can be accelerated substantially by just applying the state of the art to those industries. And having a toe in, both of you have had such a diverse exposure to a lot of different, not just countries, but also markets, and also how they relate to each other. And I think that makes for Simon and I talk about this a lot in terms of the ability to connect various points of seemingly unrelated topics together is the way to innovate and the way to actually get the most impact out there. It's so cool that you guys have each put yourself in situations that are genuinely diverse and very different from, I think, the average person in VC. And I'm such a big fan of that aspect of it too.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So I want to talk about, I think it may be the elephant in the room, in which often in the realm of investing in venture, impact and returns are often at odds, or perceived to be at odds. And I want to get your guys' perspective on what is your experience with that so far?
So this is exactly the heart of our thesis, is having done this for over 15 or 16 years, we have a lot of examples and anecdotes to prove otherwise, and to prove that the two can really go hand in hand, especially when you're talking about today's world of AI and things that are extremely scalable. The argument of they cannot go hand in hand fades, because where there is scalability, there is ability to actually have both a financial return and an impact. And we have examples in our current portfolio as well as in our previous experience.
So it comes down to the idea of scalability then. So that's what you're looking for when looking at differentiated ideas.
Yeah, but also impact being top of mind. I mean, many people start philanthropy or being impactful once they're billionaires, right? Well, we want our founders to think about impact not as an afterthought. We want it to be part and parcel from day one. Yeah. Even if, that we ask for a single impact measure, they can, even if it's zero for a little while or long while, it doesn't matter. As long as they measure it and they aspire to improve on it. And that could be a variety of things. It could be life saved, could be injuries prevented, could be miles driven on EVs, and could be a variety of things. And that's up really for the founder to tell us as part of their building the business.
And you do that from the ground up, it sounds like. It's from the very first conversations that you have with the founders, like right alongside understanding their market potential and their TAM and all of these things. You're saying that put impact into that phase of the company.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, on the intake form, when founders submit through our website, there are questions on impact. And we often have to revisit these conversations with them, because some of them aren't even very aware that they can have a much greater impact than what they write in the form. And we typically analyze impact on 3 levels: the founder and who they are, who they're hiring and whether as part of their growth strategy they hire overlooked or underserved communities, and last, the business outcome and whether there is a significant impact on an overlooked or underserved or vulnerable population. And oftentimes in conversations they haven't really considered that, and there are some aha moments, and then they come back to us and say, here's the metric, does this work?
Totally. I love that the thesis of it is expanding outside of climate, because I think that obviously climate tech has had a huge bubble this year, particularly, which is a great thing. Like, there's nothing wrong with investing into climate, but recognizing that climate impact is so much more than just environmental health necessarily. And there's so many other facets that you could be contributing to. When you talk to founders, do you find that you have to often get them out of that headspace and like sort of open the wide world to them in terms of like different ways that they can sort of strategize? Is that a help that you provide really early on?
Absolutely. So it's help we provide, and it's interesting that we provide it to two very different profiles of founders. So those who've grown up in tech and are very comfortable with it, we have to have the impact conversation. Those who grew up in some of the marginalized communities, having the space to say, draw from your experience of where you grew up, and it's okay to have these conversations. So they are a little bit different because of feeling like I'm not allowed to talk about this while I'm talking about my tech business versus what is this that you're talking about when it comes to impact. But yeah, we do offer support for both, and it's part of also why community is one of our pillars, because obviously we're a small firm, we can't do everything, but we lean on our partners who are either impact organizations or educational institutions to help us grow these conversations with the founders.
Totally. Community is something that we're very interested in as well at Omni. And I think that the power of community, and as you're mentioning, venture is a unique industry in which you can generally scale your impact to thousands as opposed to one-on-one. And community is the way to amplify that. Like, how have you guys gone about building your communities to firstly maintain the culture and the impetus of what you're trying to achieve from the get-go, but also like as the communities grow, like how do you maintain that strong sense of culture?
So building the community, I look at it as two-pronged, internal and external. So we start with the internal. We built a fellowship and internship program. And this program was very much like rallying volunteers for me in the old days for some of the nonprofits I supported. It's loosely structured. So they come in, they understand the pillars, the vision, and then we just have them work across all aspects of the business. And over time, we're constantly reminding them of impact and what it means and how it looks. So that's on the inside. On the outside, the initiative of Impact a Billion and going out and rallying others to be a part of it is rooted in a roadshow. We put down about a year ago a list of cities that we were going to go and talk to communities where we felt there might be a need for impact and say, Silicon Valley's insular, we're coming to you, let's have a conversation. Where are the areas that require support? Where are the vulnerable populations in your community? Who represents them? And can we speak to the founders that care to do anything in that space? And that roadshow has proven incredibly positive for us. We've met over 80 organizations. We've had over 2,000 people that we've rallied from those roadshows so far that are participating in one way or another. And I think that's just going to continue to accelerate.
Wow. I would love to learn more about the strategy behind the roadshow. I think oftentimes, especially in the world of COVID, venture turned very virtual. And there's definitely something to be said about the whole human tangible aspect of it. Like, how did you plan your roadshow? How do you figure out where to go? And have you noticed that it's different than simply virtually connecting with folks?
It's radically different. From meeting the Uber driver who has a conversation with you about what's going on in that neighborhood to the very deliberate town hall meeting type meetings that we've had where the community comes in and talks, and we're there to listen and understand and learn from what's happening, to then bringing in the tech founders or the organizations that are supporting the tech founders and saying, listen, don't leave the impact conversation out of the room. If you're talking about tech, bring that impact conversation with it, because it will differentiate you. It will open up a space, not just for you, but for everybody in tech to consider from the get-go. And we've been very lucky that, I mean, initially it was my alma mater, the George Washington University, who said, yes, come on in and we'll bring others. And then members of our immediate community. And now it's growing to people we don't know who are reaching out and saying, I've heard you've done this and we would like to replicate.
Totally. And so it's basically just being the example that you want to see exist in the world and showing people that this is possible. Rama, you've mentioned also this applies to being a woman in venture as well. Can you elaborate more on what that has meant and how you've really built your career to be that type of example for folks?
Yeah, so I mean, we all know the statistics. Less than 3% of venture capital is women or funding female startups and female-led startups. And for me, this is a huge reason for why I am in this space. Not for any ill intention, but just because of how we grow up, we have a bias for our own. I may understand you a little bit better than I'd understand Simon. We have some commonalities within our experience. And so with that, the fellowship program is directly aimed at, okay, let's bring more women into the group, because when we sit around the table and our predominantly male deal analysts are speaking, they leave out important aspects unintentionally because they don't know the history or the impact. And one female voice won't be able to support that. But if you had equitable amounts of women in the room, then it could be a conversation rather than kind of a defensive or inequitable metric. And then, extrapolate from that to, again, Black females that are having also a very different and much more extreme experience coming into the space. So we look at bringing all of those voices, and we've had initially a webinar to just educate women on the opportunity, and now invite. And I'm very happy to report next week we have an orientation with, I think, 85% female for the new cohort of fellows and interns.
That's incredible. I think the ability to, it's definitely, there's in part obviously leading by example, but I think there's a whole mystery right now of people tangentially understand it's important to include diversity. And I think both of your backgrounds, Rayed and Rama, like you've been kind of an outlier in almost every space that you've been in, not just in terms of the success that you've had, but also in terms of like how you've placed yourself specifically. Like basically there were never any walls for you guys to enter the areas that you wanted to enter in. And I think that's a really important mindset. And one question that I have is how can we expand that more? And I think that's a through your internship program that you mentioned and your fellowship program, it's absolutely an amazing first step. How can we as other people in venture and even outside of venture, like continue that mindset? Like, how do we keep telling people that the walls don't actually exist? Is there like a way? Do you have any theories around that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's just bringing more people into the conversation. And like all industries, like the internet, initially we were talking earlier, it started with a group of highly technical people. This has transformed radically. Now, people who are building startups that are empowered by the internet or by technology come from all walks of life. Mm-hmm. I always draw this analogy and say, and this is where the VC world is today. Today there are less than 3% women in the venture capital industry. Those were similar statistics in the medical sector or in the internet. So it's not that nobody wants you here. It's that you haven't opened the door. So open the door and you'll find your place in the industry. I think that, and something you mentioned earlier, Simon, the imposter syndrome. I talk to a lot of female founders, and oftentimes they feel that imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And I think just learning to brush it off and say, it's okay. If I feel it, it's okay, but I shouldn't, and I can, grow out of it, if you will, is a conversation that's very common with folks wanting to come into the space.
How do you see just being an early stage investor, pre-seed and seed, and maybe even first into the first round or first check itself as being impactful? I'm curious on that.
Yeah,
versus investing into founders that have already received
Yeah.
money from other investors.
Yeah, I mean, when I first came from Canada, I actually wrote a letter to my families saying, hey, I want to impact $1 billion, make $1 billion. This is why I'm making the move. And then I arrive in the Bay Area, and a few weeks later, I meet this founder. And he says, oh, I want to get 1 billion cars on the road, 1 billion EVs on the road. I'm like, oh, well, there's at least 2 or 3 people per car. This guy is 3 billion. He's going to impact 3 billion people. It's like he's 3 times more ambitious than I am. And that's, I came in thinking I'm the most ambitious guy, I'm the smartest guy. I come here, I'm frequently made to feel that I'm the dumbest guy in the room, and of recent on the Zoom. And the result is it's extraordinary to meet these founders. And when you're early in backing them, there's just that special bond. This particular company, Ample, who's they're local.
Nice. Representing.
They provide full electric energy to any EV brand in under 5 minutes.
Wow.
With a very compelling business model, 0 upfront capital, and they charge a fee per mile that is 20% cheaper than gasoline. So we anticipate they'll be making more money per Uber car than Uber. And since then they've received large investments from Shell Energy and Blackstone and others. We are, proudly the smallest major investor in this company, and we still have a place in the hearts of the founders. We get their time and attention, and we help them as much as possible. And that's all the result of having been there early and been with them through and through in every step, and felt the hurdles they had to go through and tried to help them as much as possible.
Totally. I would love to hear your guys' perspective on how you pick founders like this. Like, ones that obviously have grand visions is one thing, but how do you make sure that they're attainable grand visions that actually are actionable? Or what features do you look for in founders?
Yeah, there's a bunch. I mean, we look for founders that are frugal, founders that are resourceful, that can stretch every dollar. I always say wastefulness scales really well. So if you're wasteful with $100, well, guess what? With $1 million, it'll be even more wasteful. So we pay attention to all sort of things. Does this person over tip at restaurants? Do they show up on time? Do they do the things they say they're going to do?
Ooh.
And there's a famous, I think, blog by Mark Suster's investors, and much like you, invest in lines, not in dots. So seldom times we invest in the first meeting. Let's have that second meeting, draw a line. Maybe a third meeting, draw a longer line.
Steal that.
Yeah,
I've been using the trajectory analogy. Like, what's the trajectory of a founder from multiple points? But I should be using lines instead of dots.
You mentioned checking if they how they tip, how they interact with servers at restaurants. Like, that's a whole new level of diligence that's like outside the business entirely. Is that a part of your guys' diligence process of like understanding who they are as people, I guess, early?
I wouldn't say it's part of like our process.
Totally. It's not like written in stone.
Yeah,
no golden rules.
For outside of our systems, call it. They're kind of interpersonal. That's why we'd like to meet our founders, take them out, be taken out by them, build those relationships. It's ultimately people do business together, not organizations that do business together.
And those things are very telling, especially on the impact side. I mean, I always say to founders who come to LA, come, let's go for a walk. And so we do our long walks together, and, fitness is part of longevity. I mean, if you're fit, then you can go the long haul. And it also is very telling about how sustainable you are and how you can endure challenges. And so, as well as like how much you like nature, and are really, when you're talking impact, you're not just talking about dollar impact, but rather genuine impact in nature. Those things are quite telling and important.
That's so interesting. We have a question for our own founders in terms of how do they recover or de-stress from a very stressful or bad day. And one of the things that I have noticed a trend in our best founders is exercise is like high on that list, and either with people or solo in nature, something like along those lines that really helps them disconnect. Totally agree. I think there's like, and this is obviously not, there's positives and negatives to like being too hard into exercise, but I think having a way to like emotionally regulate via movement, I think is a really interesting trend that I've been seeing myself in some of our founders.
Yeah. And as you know, in the world of startups, the highs are high and the lows are really low. So oftentimes these exercises are just a really good way to vent out all this negative energy one might accumulate from a bad day.
Seriously. Yeah, you're mentioning already you're a big cyclist. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to distract.
Yeah, go ahead.
You do like big bike rides with your founders or anything like that?
Yeah, the ones that would have me with them for sure.
I love that. Sorry, Rama, I cut you off.
No, I mean, I was saying even the language that's used sometimes on calls, the positive narrative, the assertiveness, the also compassion when they're talking about impact, and then the follow-up and attentiveness when we do bring up something material to read about their space, and then they come back having done that and looked at it. I think that's very telling of how serious they are about being present in the space, not just I'm here to make money and walk out the rest. Yeah.
Absolutely. There's a whole, I think, psychological element to making that first founder connection as well, in addition to like vetting all of the tactical things. I would love to learn more about other non-tangibles that you guys look for in founders. So there's like the grit aspect, there's how they sort of carry themselves in the world. Is there anything else? Basically what I'm hearing is that you're vetting like good humans in addition to good businesses, which I think is absolutely the right way to go about it.
Yeah. They also need to
life
be good
learning. Sorry.
Yeah.
See, actually, if a founder can grab both mine and Raed's attention, which tend to be on opposite extremes, like I'm saying learner and Raed saying salesman, and if they can grab both of our attentions, then that definitely exemplifies a good founder. But you were saying Raed, good salesperson.
Yeah, it's. I mean, as you know, a founder is always selling, be it to an investor, a co-founder, a customer, a future employee. So one of my good friends, he said he's, I think it's after a show of some sort, ABC. What's that? Always be closing. So that's kind of
and then I like to hear them learning and listening, and I always say you have to be a life learner.
Totally.
Yeah.
There are so many. Simon has the exact same sales. I think storytelling is basically how we they have to be a good storyteller. And there's a line too, I think, though, where some things are coachable and some things are not. Mm-hmm. What things do you view as coachable and what things do you view as like they kind of have to inherently have these things?
I think heroes are made, not born. Everything can be accomplished with practice. There's nothing that I mean, obviously some people are born gifted and so forth, but a hard worker will always beat a more talented person who's not hardworking.
Totally.
Curiosity, I think, if it's difficult to teach curiosity for adults, it's because I think innately we are curious, and then somehow it's beaten out of us through education systems or some other way. And so for those who come to us lacking curiosity, we may hint at it. If that door doesn't open, then it's really hard to teach or to coach.
Yeah. John Chambers always says, think like a teenager.
Think like a teenager. I like that. Raed, on the hard work thing, my favorite quote I learned this year was, "It's amazing how lucky hardworking people are." I had a much longer, not as succinct version of that before I heard it. But
well, they say success is made of hard work until luck strikes, basically.
Yeah.
So another big one for me is humility. And today, Stefan, a gentleman I was speaking with, told me this quote that I really liked. It said, "Humility is power under control," which I think is very, very meaningful. People who have that humility are definitely powerful.
Absolutely. And getting to tap into that. I think there's so many aspects of this that are really wonderful. I think starting with a mindset of like, there is limitless possibility, recognizing that whatever you have right now, like inherently innate to yourself, is able to be grown into something that can be even more impactful than you can even imagine yourself to currently be. And letting people know that that future is possible and within their grasp. All of that is super inspiring. And I really hope we're going to definitely take clips of this and help share it out to the world after, because this is exactly, I think, the type of energy and mindset that really is missing in venture a lot of the time. People really look for like one very specific slice and silo of like one type of founder from a great school that checks all of these boxes. But in reality, like what the world really needs is a reset of what that is. That whole, white box definition of what a Silicon Valley backable founder is needs to be expanded in order for us to create new types of companies. And I think I want to circle back to the internship program that you guys were mentioning before, in terms of like getting people really early and figuring out how to support them in those early days. How has that program been working? How can people learn more about that program and apply, and tell us more about that?
So we're revamping our website and putting that program on there. In the meantime, they can fill out the contact us form on the site, and we can send them the details in email. It's working very well from what we hear from our team members. And we have a feedback loop where once a month, they get to fill out a form and tell us how we're doing, and we tell them how they're doing. And then we have a little conversation about that. And what I've heard they like is that A, the organization is very flat, and that B, they get hands-on experience in all of the different areas, and that C, we give them a historical perspective that they're not getting on what they're working on, that they're not getting in academia or in the private sector, wherever they are. They're teaching us a lot about how we can conduct ourselves better to scale, to grow, and that's been very valuable for us. Do you have anything to add on that?
Nothing more to add. Perfect.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to share that program with the folks that I meet, especially ones that are on the brink of, they know they want to do something more and impact more, but they're not quite sure where to start. It sounds like a really great spot for most people to start out.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, really excited about that. When part of your story, Rama, that was so incredible to me is the fact that we already touched upon like the impact and the power of actually going in person to different sites to make those interpersonal connections. On top of that, what stood out to me was the geographies that you pick are very atypical. And I want to understand better what drives the selection of those specific locations. And then also, how does that impact the types of deals that you guys are looking for later down the line and projects you want to take on?
So I have to say, the formula we don't have quite down yet. And a great part of it is that luck, the hard work with the luck, where we start thinking. So I read a book about called the Color of the Law. And it talks about properties and property rights in America. And from that, it got me thinking about where are these inequities and in display and affecting communities. And we talked to one of our advisors, Safir Rab, who joined us recently last year. He's in the real estate space, gave us some insights and input. And that led us to Chicago. And in Chicago, we met a nonprofit that works in, is it the south side of Chicago? I'm geographically disoriented, but they were talking to us about food deserts and about the challenges of getting alternative energy into the areas that need it most in the projects and other areas. And so it kind of opened our eyes to those challenges, and we got to see them firsthand, where you're in this area with absolutely no food or greenery or like supermarkets. So from there, it's immediately you start thinking of the what call to action can you have to get those property tech founders or those food distribution tech founders that can help solve for these problems. That similarly happened in Greensboro, but in Greensboro, the conversation was around health and health affordability and accessibility in Greensboro, North Carolina. So how it happens, it could come from anyone on our team that says, I've read this book, I've watched this documentary, I saw this report, and this is happening right here in America in this particular area. And then that's when we go after that and start poking around until we find the right demographic to work with.
It's really impressive. Going into specific communities and seeing the problems firsthand is honestly unparalleled. I think you can apply whatever Harvard Business Review model to whatever business you think, and in concept on paper, it sounds like it should work, but you don't get that sense of what the real hurdles actually are until you experience them firsthand. And I think, especially in, for example, like we're very interested in manufacturing and understanding the actual hurdles that individual manufacturers face on a daily basis is something that, like, if you just look at the financial models of these companies, you'll never understand. Mm-hmm. And it's a huge aspect in finding product market fit well. And what you've just answered basically is that finding product market fit appropriately means that you have to understand the problems deeply. And to do that in a new, impactful way means you have to put yourself in different situations than the majority of other people are willing to do, which I think is it's such a unique perspective. Yeah.
Absolutely. And the other benefit to that is trust building, because, being so remote allows for a lot of miscommunication to happen. So you end up solving for the wrong problem. But when you're there firsthand, talking to the folks affected by the problem or those solving for it, you really build that trust and engagement for people to be vulnerable with the problems and the solutions, and then have a dialogue instead of this kind of remote feedback loop that doesn't work.
Yeah. Do you encourage your founders to remain integrated inside of the communities that they're building their companies to solve? Often there's a stigma that, like, once companies are formed, everyone has to move to Silicon Valley to be successful. What's your guys' take on that?
Well, part of this impact $1 billion is we believe Silicon Valley is the best place to build a tech startup. So I think that's generally accepted. We want to bring the rigor of Silicon Valley to those inner cities of America and help these founders crack Silicon Valley in weeks instead of years, in everything that that word entails. And so no, they don't need to move here, but we want them to get the benefit as if they lived here without having to be here. And if we do that successfully, then Impact $1 Billion has been successful.
It's an incredible goal. Yeah. How do you do that? I'm so, like, there's so many different intangible facets, I feel like, of Silicon Valley. Like, what aspects do you think are repeatable and replicatable in different geographies?
You had asked me a question in the prep for this about my role models. And I think that's the kind of thing there are two women in my life who are my role models. First is my mother. She's taught me to be a fearless and rigorous entrepreneur. And the second is Rama. She's refining and institutionalizing all this fearlessness and rigorness. So really together, I think we've got this interesting formula that we're really trying to instill and provide as a package to our entrepreneurs.
And to your so thank you, Raed, for saying that. I appreciate it. Nice. We fight so often during the day. We're like at odds, and so thank you for saying that. But Sabrina, the example of Greensboro is an excellent one, because Kyle Fambury, the president of Guilford College, helped facilitate our visit there, and he led with this forum on the ethics of AI, and then convened another couple of meetings for us to meet with the folks about the development of the entrepreneurship ecosystem. partnering with folks at a local level like Kyle, who has a vision, who has a platform that can actually bring together the right parties into the room and localize anything. So we might have ideas on what would fit for them, but they can tell you what gaps they have that you can help fill remotely, and then what assets that they have that you can bring back with you to Silicon Valley and learn from. So I think this is, this model of go out and listen and communicate, and then bridge the gaps and say, this is what I bring to you, and they say, this is what we can give you, is the formula to succeed.
So it's really understanding deeply what resources exist there and how to fill those gaps appropriately. And that has to be led from the people that are local to those geographies. It sounds like there's no real widespread approach you can just slap on to every single one, because they're all unique in that way.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's incredible. And so for the Impact Billion, I see the vision of replicating it to 1,000, impacting another 1,000. And I see the way that you're finding new geographies to dive into and help at a local level. What other aspects to Impact Billion are you most excited about as you're launching it into the next realm?
One is the collaborative effort with you, and bringing you into the same group, and having us amplify our work together. Mm-hmm. And the way to do that is by saying, all right, well, the next roadshow, we're going to do this together. So that's having that bigger momentum on roadshows. The second aspect of that is the news site itself. So impactabillion.com. I envision it, maybe 5 years down the road, or maybe even 3 years down the road, being the TechCrunch of impact, and having that be seeded and fed by the entire community. That's that, and achieving that one vision that you said, Sabrina, which is not just the VCs and the tech people on there, but rather a representative of anybody who's affected by AI, and is having a conversation about the positive impact of AI or other deep tech.
I'm really, really excited about that. I feel like we keep talking for hours on so many aspects of your guys' background. I want to bring it back to, it's incredibly unique. So the way that you've approached this entire industry is very unique to your guys' own experiences, to realize that boundaries can be pushed in this way. I think what I want to end on before our final question is, do you have any pieces of advice for either VCs trying to break into this industry that are trying to do better for the world as well, or founders that are trying to figure out how to position their companies, of where they should start and where they should figure out where to spend most of their energy as they're trying to grow something new?
Ed, do you want to start?
There's so much advice out there, and so much advice and opinions. Let's just say, do what you love. When you do what you love, you don't work a day in your life. And Rama and I are up at 4 and 5 a.m. daily, not because we have to. It's just I wake up before my alarm clock every day. I just can't wait to get
excited
get something done.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I encourage founders to chase their dreams, but also be practical. Maybe initially join a startup, learn. The nice thing by working for a startup is you usually work on things that you're not qualified to do. and do a few years of that, then you'll have a better appreciation for what the market might need and a pain point that resonates with you. I started as cell phone operator because my cell phone bill was so high, and all I could think of is I wanna have a lower cell phone bill.
You're the perfect customer for your own technology. I agree. A lot of the founders that we love to invest in are ones that have suffered through a very specific pain point and are pissed off enough to actually get up and do something about it. I agree with that completely, Rayed.
I would add to that if you're entering the VC industry, great if you have an idea that's unique, but also listen to the LPs that you're speaking with, because they give really good advice. And Raed and I, in the past year or two, talking to LPs, have learned so much about how to refine our thesis and focus and learn to convey our message in a deliberate and quantitative and qualitative way. And we couldn't have done that without those conversations and the advice that they were giving us.
Totally.
Just like founders listen to VCs, emerging managers listen to LPs.
Exactly.
They're the best ones to.
I love the
Exactly.
underscoring of making sure everything is quantifiable, though, because I think when things are typically or historically, the world of impact and benefit is kind of an intangible feeling that people get as opposed to a quantifiable metric. And I love, even from the beginning of our conversation, emphasizing that no, that should be as quantifiable as anything else inside of your company and your business. Start from ground zero, put parameters around it, and figure out how you can every quarter, every week, every month match and get towards that goal.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So many amazing learnings from this conversation. I'm really, really excited about having you guys here. To close out, we have our final question. And our final question is, who in each of your careers has been most impactful?
I've already answered that, so I guess Rama.
Yeah, you're off. Well, before we do that, cheers definitely to Rama and Raed, your mother, for
Thank
being such a
you.
positive
Cheers.
experience. Cheers.
It goes back to my college days, Professor Shelley Heller, because she was in the School of Engineering. There were only a few women, maybe 3 per a class of 20 or 30 men, and she really taught me to stand my grounds, and also taught me to look in places that aren't typical of the engineers at the time. So she was combining education with tech and media with tech. And that's just that I think defined my trajectory. And she remained a mentor until she retired just a few months ago. So that would be my choice.
Amazing. Cheers to her as well.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Oh, incredible. I'm so inspired. Raed, Rama, thank you so much for your time and for sharing all of your wisdom with us. We really appreciated having you on.
Yeah, one other
Thank
thing
you for
before
hosting us.
Yeah, please,
yes,
Raed.
the audience might have noticed that both Simon and I, as we cheer, there's this little iron ring that shows up, and that's a very Canadian thing. For
those who don't know, tell us what it is.
It means we're every Canadian engineer. So once upon a time, there was a Canadian engineer who built a bridge and used to round up numbers all the time. 9.9, oh, let's call it a 10, and so forth. But the bridge fell and people died. Oh, no. So all that iron of the bridge was turned into iron rings that we any Canadian engineering graduate will get to wear one, and only provided to them by a fellow engineer. So non-engineers are not even permitted in the room. And it's
served to remind us of our duty.
That's so cool.
That's really
cool. Like this. That's so awesome.
I know. I was thinking we have to come up with something like that. Maybe this will be the takeaway from this call. The 4 of us need to come up with something
unifying
for impact.
Power, to get everyone connected. That's awesome.
The conclusion is Raed's very observant. All the tipping and the small details.
I know. Always tune into the small details. I mean, they matter though, right? And that's, I think, the whole premise of really creating impact from the ground up. Amazing.
On that note, to wrap up, I'm going to read a quote from impactabillion.com. Making money is easy. Having an impact requires strategy, community, and an audacious goal, rooted in values and a plan carried out by those who live the pain and can see better future enabled by technology.
Totally.
Cheers so much.
Cheers, everyone.
Great quote.
Thank you guys so much.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Everyone out there in the community, this has been Beers with VCs, episode 7 with Raed and Rama from Transform VC. See you next month. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.